I want to introduce people who are not strangers to, I think, to any of us, but I welcome them today. And Diana and Sara will guide us through, in case you haven't looked at the presentation, Dancing with the Quantum, a synchronicity presentation. Exploration of those meaningful moments when the universe seems to speak directly to us. These two friends who enrich my life will help us understand synchronicity through depth psychology and spirituality. Discover how to live more attuned to these quantum flows in our daily life and create sacred space for us to share and own synchronistic experiences. And for those of you who have already experienced their presentation, you know the profound journey awaiting us. And for newcomers, if there are any, prepare for an interactive exploration into one of life's most intriguing phenomena. Welcome, my two dear friends.
Thank you, Afton. Okay, hi everyone. So today we are going to be talking about synchronicities. And I have a little presentation that I will share. If you just bear with me for one moment. Hey. I believe you guys can see the image and the word synchronicity, and that's all you see.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, great. Okay, so as Afton said, today we're talking about one of life's most intriguing phenomena, synchronicity, or those moments when the universe seems to be speaking directly to us. This is a presentation that Diane and I have been wanting to do for a long time, and the day has finally arrived. So it's going to be a three-part presentation. First, we'll examine the phenomena of synchronicity through the lens of depth psychology and spirituality to understand what these experiences might mean. And then Diana will take us through living through the quantum flow, and she'll discuss what it means to be open and aware of these meaningful connections in our daily lives. And then in the third part, we'll share our stories. And everyone will have the opportunity to share their own experiences of synchronicity and reflect on how these meaningful coincidences have influenced their lives and perspectives. So here we go. Synchronicity. So synchronicity is a phenomenon that Carl Jung discovered, and he collaborated with Wolfgang Pauli, who was a physicist and pioneer of quantum mechanics, on synchronicity. And according to Jung, synchronicity is the experience of meaningful coincidences that occur between an individual's internal psychological state and the external events, where these events appear to be connected despite lacking a causal relationship. And it's not really a random occurrence, but rather a phenomenon suggesting a deeper connection, an underlying order between the inner world and the outer world. It's a bridge between psyche and matter. And according to Jung, synchronistic events occur when an individual's personal unconscious aligns with the collective unconscious, creating a meaningful connection between the inner and outer experiences. And Jung's description of meaningful coincidences clearly distinguishes a true synchronicity from a mere coincidence. Synchronicities are often characterized by strong effect and by their numinous quality. So it is an event both in the material world of a space and time and causality, as well as an event in the inner world of psyche, dream, and symbolism. And Jung said, and I quote, "We should be particularly watchful when synchronous events occur, for a numen is then in sight." Now, a definition of a numen is a spirit or divine power presiding over a thing or a place. So I'm going to read the quote again because I think it's significant. He said, "We should be particularly watchful when synchronous events occur, for a numen is then in sight." Now, synchronicities are linked to activation of an archetype, and they tend to occur when the time is right. So those trapped in the grip of an archetype tend to also be trapped in time, whereas the appearance of a synchronicity can free us from that frozen time. And just as causality connects us to the past, synchronicities can connect us to the future. So a causal event that happens and then causes something else happen and then something else to happen, that's connecting us to the past, whereas synchronicities will connect us to the future, and they make a marker in time, a distinction between past, present, and the future. So synchronicities involve events that are not just random, but have a deeper meaning or purpose. And these events often carry a sense of significance or resonance. They also seem to be orchestrated by a higher power or intelligence. Jung said that we may say that divine does not speak in words, it speaks in synchronicities. And they can also be considered as meetings or encounters. Generally, these might be some human figure, such as a mentor, but it could also be with a book, a work of art, a piece of music that has considerable numinous effect within a person's life. This person might open a door for you, or this book might introduce you to something new that you may not have encountered on your own. And by opening this door, they allow you to pass through it. I'll share a personal story here. When I was about 18 years old, I was one day at my boyfriend's house, and there was a book on their coffee table. And their house was, a lot of people would come and go. It was a busy house. And I asked his mother whose book this is, and she had no idea whose book it was, where it came from. So I asked if I could borrow it, and it was just a white cover with the title "The Dear One." And I read the book, and it was a book about the spiritual master Sai Baba. And through the book, I was introduced to him, and then I started going to meetings of his followers. And years later, I went to India. And that one book that was there on that coffee table by chance completely changed my life and introduced me to the world of spirituality, and had a really significant effect in the course of my life. So that's just an example of something or someone who can open a door for you through synchronicity. Another interesting concept that Jung introduced, or a phenomenon that he observed, was what he called the transcendent function, which is a psychological bridge between consciousness and the unconscious, or what he called living the symbolic life. which means sensing the archetypal dimensions within the patterns and actions and choices of everyday life. So, the way it works is that to stay with a situation with the expectation that an answer will come sets the stage for the transcendent function. This means that something arises from the unconscious to solve the problem or show the way to an ego who needs help from beyond itself. So, transcendent function can also be expressed through synchronistic events. When synchronicity happens, it can feel like a miracle, sending tingles up the spine. Synchronistic events do not necessarily provide tangible answers to a dilemma. Instead, they usually help resolve a problem by providing emotional clarity or symbolic insight. And I'll really briefly, Diana will go deeper into this, but to cultivate a mindset that is open to synchronistic events, it is important to develop our intuition and practice self-awareness. By quieting the mind and tuning into our inner wisdom, we can better recognize these meaningful coincidences. So, synchronicities invite us to trust in the divine plan unfolding and surrender to the flow of life. And I will end with a quote by Jung. Synchronicity is an ever present reality for those who have eyes to see. And with that, I'll hand it over to Diana.
Thank you, Sarah. That's so beautiful. Your visuals and the explanation. I would never look at the backstory. I wouldn't try to analyze it or understand it, but my experience with it has been so experiential, and I won't bore you with all my old stories about meeting Paul in a hotel in Hong Kong, just standing there for no reason, knowing something would happen that day. I mean, I learned early that things just kind of showed up out of nowhere, and I began to have a fine tuning. It was as if I could tune into something. And I remember I very early on learned to say, I am open and receptive to my highest good. And that just felt like something that was opening a doorway. Um, and I began to trust that things began to show up. You all know the Elvis story that I told my sorority sisters. I was going to meet him, and I did a couple of months later. I mean, there were just things that showed up that gave me validation that this worked in some way. And it was almost like a need to become a sort of a tuning fork that I would get a little ping sometimes when I would meet someone. I remember meeting Candace Wheeler for the first time. She was a line producer who came to our house to produce a pilot for a television cooking show. And there was just something about her. And I remember saying to her, you and I are going to be very good friends. And it wasn't long after that that she invited us to a meditation evening at her house. And there was this wild and wonderful man there named Tom Sewell. And I just lit up when I saw him. And then he insisted that Paul and I go with him to this morning thing called Impact, which was the precursor of the Inside Edge. It met from 6 to 8 in the morning, and it was a crazy thing to be doing. And it was there that we met Tim Peering, I mean, and it was not long later that Tim Peering and a woman I had seen across the room stood up and said something, and I said to Paul, go get that woman, we need her. And he got right up and went over to Mary Kelly, tapped her on the shoulder and said, come with me, my wife wants you. And we instantly became best friends. So, I mean, it was just constant flow of little sparks that showed up. The earliest I began to explain it to myself was that we had written our first cookbook, Paul and I, and it was the beginning of our 15-year career in the culinary world. And we ended up in the office of a man named Jeremy Tarcher, who was a publisher who published The Aquarian Conspiracy and many others. He was quite a revolutionary and very conscious publisher. And behind him on the wall was a quote that I think is really, really good for explaining all of this in ways that I can't. It said, it was a quote by, let me see here. Okay, well, I'll tell you in a minute. It said, until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. And I think that's what we're really talking about, that once one has a vision and a clarity, that there is invisible help that, as Robin referred to in the meditation, that flows into our life to support that. He goes on, all sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents, meetings, and material assistance, which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. I have learned a deep respect for one of Goethe's couplets. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius power and magic in it. Begin it now. And I think I've pretty much lived with that all my life. Candace then had a conference up at Brew Joy's Ranch. And I remember, with the arrogance of youth, kind of dismissing in my mind this retired dentist who was there. His name was Oliver. And I was kind of annoyed that we had this old man, he must have been at least 60, in our group. But anyway, I gradually began to really resonate to his wisdom. And I don't remember ever doing this with anyone else, but I took him aside and I said, Oliver, what is the most important thing you've ever learned? And he said, expect magic. And that just went through me like, like a burst of sun. And that had to be 30 years ago. But that title just stayed with me because it verbalized what we're talking about here today. There's magic afoot, you guys. And there's all this invisible help that we might never notice unless we begin to tune in. Robin mentioned in her meditation something about a silent symphony or music playing. And I really do believe that there is this amazing music playing that we can begin to listen to and pay attention to. There have been so many moments in my life when I take one step towards something that I feel excited by, and then all these other things begin to happen. It's almost like sparks begin flying. And as you know, I'm passionate right now about people expressing to people that they appreciate the deep reasons why, because we all, in our human experience, need to hear sometimes. There are times when we're vulnerable, there's times when we're sad or we forget who we are. And when somebody actually takes the time to verbalize appreciation, it makes all the difference, like Inger's story this morning. I mean, she will hold the memory of that phone call in her heart. One day it was raining for a week about. It rained and rained and rained. I was married to Ted, and I hadn't been out of the house in a long time. And I had this sudden feeling, well, I have to go somewhere where I can walk indoors somewhere and get out of the house. And I ran over South Coast Plaza. It didn't intrigue me, but across the street there was another mall there, the Crystal Court. So I decided to go walking in there, and there was a shop that had, oh, sports memorabilia and things like that. Um, but they had a framed picture, and it's above my desk right now. And I was so drawn to this. And it's a letter from Helen Keller to her publisher. And it reveals so much of her inner beauty and appreciation for things that even though she was blind and deaf, she would talk about being in Scotland and they were expecting birdsong. I mean, it was quite remarkable. Um, and I went back and I told Ted about it. I went back and I looked at it several times. I said, "This is the most amazing thing." He says, "Diana, you have money, buy it." Yeah, well, duh. I did buy it, and I knew that it would always inspire me. And it also reminded me just by her hand signature on this letter how important it was. Let me read you just one little thing in here that was amazing because she's writing about Charles Lindbergh. I am only too familiar with the annoyances of being hounded by reporters, but I find that an attitude of courtesy and kindness works wonder with them, and I believe I have a host of good friends among them. I have in mind an incident which points to my meaning. A friend of my sister's was chosen by a reception committee to present Colonel Lindbergh with a bouquet of roses. He asked coldly, "Is it official?" Or, "Is it official?" Of course, he was bored to death by pretty girls offering him all manner of things from kisses to roses, but surely it would not have taken any more of his time or vitality to be friendly. The acceptance of 100 bouquets would not have cost him more than refusing them, and the fragrance of goodwill would have followed him into his quiet hours. And I was so touched by that expression. Um, and letters have become so important to me. Not just letters, but sometimes I hand people a little red heart and I just say, "This is for you. I'm putting my heart in your hands. I want you to remind you how amazing you are," or something like that. And people have told me that they put the heart on their altar or they carry it in their pocket as a touchstone. Anything that we can do that sparks a burst of joy in somebody is worth doing. So I started this thing, www.loveletters.love, without any knowledge of where it could go. But what began to happen was it began to gather some momentum because a few weeks later, a man who is a professor at Stanford and an editor at the New York Times wrote an article for the New York Times called "Send Thank You Notes Even Though They Are Years Late." And I thought, this is amazing. This is so synchronistic. And then Bill Hoverton wrote me a note that he was going to teach the homeboys about writing love letters. And that a couple of women or people there shared, "Well, I'm going to tell my son how important, so I feel like that's what happens when synchronicity happens. When we take one step toward something that vibrates with a frequency that attracts us, that we're drawn to, that we are flooded, if we notice, with all sorts of support. And I know that this particular meeting is the circle within. So it's very important that we have a chance to hear from all of us here. So I'll end my part of the presentation right there so that you can raise your mechanical hand or your physical hand if you have a story of synchronicity, of something that happened unexpectedly, but there was a word even that was used. It's like it was beyond expectation. It was like windows were flown open to support. So I know that this group has always been tuned into higher powers and frequencies. Mim has her hands up. So let's hear from Mim and then Hyacinth.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you, Sara. Um, in 1966, I was living in Chatsworth with my husband and our two little boys, and a distant cousin of his came to visit us. Her name was Eva Beck, and we had an amazing connection. And she's always been very dear to me. She lived in Australia, and I haven't had any contact with her in what, 60 years? Well, a while ago, I was looking through some papers and I found a letter from her that she wrote back in the 60s to me. And I thought, how can I find this woman? There was no return address. I had no idea how to find her. And about a week ago, I get a notice from Psychology Today from Eva Beck, who's still in Australia, and we've been corresponding ever since. It was the strangest thing out of nowhere that I got this email from her. How are you? Are you still in California? How are you doing? And it was from Eva Beck. So we're in correspondence now.
That magnetic connection, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Hyacinth. Hyacinth, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you so much, Diana and Sarah, for this. Oh my gosh, getting only confirmations on this mentoring program called Pen Pal Princesses for young girls because we know we need to protect our young girls.
Mhm.
So, this program, the pen part of it, is to do just that, give young people an opportunity to handwrite letters because of technology. We know they would never have this opportunity. And then the pal part is the friendship and the princesses to let them know that they own all of those qualities that are expressed specifically in the Disney princesses. So I actually launched this on December 5th of 2019, choosing December 5th because December 5th is Walt Disney's birthday. And just wanted to honor him. And because of COVID, I wasn't able to continue it. Well, I am a shopaholic, as most of you know, and there's a place that I purchase things for 50 cents on Wednesdays in Cerritos. It's called City Mall, CITI Mall. So one Wednesday, I go to this mall and I find these absolutely gorgeous Disney dresses for all of 50 cents. I heard God telling me in the store, Hyacinth, this is because that program is necessary. So of course I purchased all 23 of them. And they're like size because the program would be for children like 12 to maybe 17. And my granddaughter and two of her friends, they fit them perfectly. So, it's so wonderful. And this is such a confirmation to me that this program is necessary. And it's something that I really want to leave as one of my many legacies. So thank you for that confirmation and thank you for this presentation.
Thank you. Sarah, feel free to jump in. I don't mean to be taking over
No,
here.
all
Okay.
good.
So, Michael?
Yes, thank you for this topic, Sarah and Diana. I think the word you used, Sarah, was synchronicity, was it? Is that the word? Yeah. I've spoken on this topic of what I call creating your own luck, which is, by focusing and understanding, the idea in my case has been to deliberately involve myself in highly involved populations of people and create results literally, deliberately. It's not love letters, Diana. It's actually, well, how can I get myself into a group of people who are highly involved and something will result from it? The first one was the Writers Guild. That basically got me a book contract and a whole bunch of other jobs. I ended up getting involved with it. But one time I actually saw an ad in the Hollywood canteen for a class in improvisational comedy taught by a former ex member of the Second City troupe. So I signed up for the class. And of course, if you haven't done any improv, it was pretty humiliating at first, but it was delightful. And I learned a lot about improv comedy. And I impressed the teacher of the class significantly that I ended up being his writing partner. And we ended up selling a whole series of scripts to a national radio theater, among a lot of other things. But the point was that by simply saying, I think that being involved with that group of people will create a whole series of outcomes and outflows, I could create an outcome or create my own luck. And I think this may be a spur idea of what you're talking about, is that in looking at something that you see where an opportunity might happen, you can build upon it. So that's that.
Thank you, Michael. Paul or Bonnie or both.
It's me. I was working on a business project with a colleague. One day he insisted that I take this course. I go, course? But what are you talking about? He says, I just want you to take this course. And I said, I'm not going to take a course. He says, well, I'll pay for it. Well, that were the magic words, for a Scotchman. So it's for free. So I took the course. It was called LiveSpring. And
Oh, yeah.
in that course, I met Bonnie, who I fell in love with and married. And I watched the facilitator and I said, I want to do something like this, but with business leaders, which I didn't even know was a possibility. But I committed to that. And Synchronicity appeared. And I ran into Larry Sen, who had taken LiveSpring and created a business group that facilitated similar processes. I joined the company and spent 25 years there. So that was Synchronicity. Big time, changed my whole life. And so listen, when some of these things come up. So that's my story.
Thank you. Bill.
Thank you, Diana. A few years ago, not that many years ago, maybe 6 years ago, Allison and I had a couple of basset hounds, and one of them got diagnosed by the vet with cancer, advanced cancer, and 2 months to live. Now, they had come as a bonded pair. That means they were inseparable. And so Allison immediately said, well, we need to get a dog to replace him. So the other one won't be lonely. We need to get a dog to replace him. It's like easier said than done. However, the very next morning, as I'm walking the two of them, ready to cross the corner, a truck pulls up, a guy leans out, and he goes, hey, buddy, my wife has a basset hound puppy she can't keep. Do you want it? That's the only time I've ever had an offer, from a vehicle, somebody yelling, do you want this? And it was the same breed, and it was the morning after. So I call her our miracle dog. So that's just a little humorous but valuable part of our, I wanted to share that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Love this topic, and I love expecting magic, and I love looking and expecting synchronicities and good, happy surprises. So thank you. Thank you both very much, Diana and Sara.
we'll call on Samuel in a second. It just reminds me about Penny Pierce last week and frequency. I mean, I think that there's a frequency when we go into, I need to do this. And just that little bit of opening is what magnetizes these synchronous things. Okay, we'll do Samuel and Inger at least, and we'll have time for those.
Thank you. I experienced the whole universe rearranging itself to accommodate me. About 10 or 12 years ago, I met this couple at the Spiritual Expo. They were looking for Shambhala of the West. You know, Shambhala is this beautiful temple with a beautiful lake with a golden temple that exists in the Himalayas. And I've dreamed about it. It's pristine. Anyways, they searched all the Western states and finally found one in the Santa Cristobal Mountains in Colorado. And they were having a hike up the mountain, 14,000 feet up, to have a ceremony at this Shambhala of the West. And they invited me to go. And I had already committed to be present at old friend of mine that passed, Alan Silverhearts, used to do once a month. He'd interview spiritual teachers and healers, 2 at a time, and have a big party for all of Southern California. I had already committed to that. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't go. It was on a Saturday, and I was already committed for that Saturday. So as it turns out, the couple involved with this process, their son blew his head gasket in his car. So they had to deliver a car to him in Santa Barbara, all the way from Colorado. So the husband drives all the way out, picks me up. I go with them to the gathering in Santa Barbara. We stay till about 11. He gives the son the car, and we drive back to Colorado all night long. They rearranged the meeting of the Shambhala of the West from Saturday to Sunday so I could attend. And I get there, and I had this amazing hike, and it was everything you'd ever dream of. It was just pristine. It was beautiful. It was like being in heaven. And the whole universe turned upside down to accommodate me getting there on the next day and getting a ride there with the people who were involved. It blew my mind. Amazing synchronicity. I was really blessed.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Let's call on Inger, and then I'll have some closing words, but let's go back to Sara too after Inger to say whatever she wants to say.
Thank you so much for the topic. This just blew my head this morning. So in 1980, I was gathering my dissertation for my, I had field research working that same day, and I wandered across UCLA to Pastor Hall. And somehow I heard a voice that said there was something very exciting happening inside that hall. And I had no business not getting going, but I went in, and there was this incredible woman named Marielle Fuller, who was from France, and even though she didn't have any real degrees, was on full staff now teaching guided imagery using Jungian symbolism to the whole medical school, young people. And I was fascinated. It was like my mind blew off just listening to this woman. And so, of course, I had to go right away to study with her afterwards. At that time, it was my last year. I was going to Northern California. I'd gotten a job as an assistant professor, and everything was exciting. But I thought, I still need to know this. And so right afterwards, my daughter gets hospitalized with an overdose, bad overdose. And I'm standing in the hallway, I'm writhing my hands, and I'm so scared. And there's this therapist I didn't know at the time was like de-synced to the movie industry and celebrities and whatever. And she and I started talking and, you know, whatever. Next thing I knew, I get a call after my daughter's out that she wants to talk to me. And so she invited me to come into her practice, that she had wanted to take a psych assistant, and because of my acting background and so on, she thought I would be ideal. And so now I had to make a choice. And somehow I asked my, you know, my inside, my whatever thing, you know, giving up this incredible opportunity and going with this woman. So I went. And so it was the beginning of an incredible, this incredible career in learning. I mean, you know, my whole life is in search of healing, I think. So, yeah. So anyway, two synchronicities guiding me from going in one direction to a total other direction. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Sara?
I don't really have anything to say except thank you everyone for listening and for your beautiful shares. And I actually wrote something on synchronicity recently on Substack, so I can share that by email, the link, if you guys are interested to read a little more about synchronicities. Oh, thank you.
Your article on Substack is gorgeous, and the visuals and everything. I really encourage everybody to subscribe to Sara's Substack articles. They're amazing.
Oh.
And thank you for this idea, Sara. So, one thing that I think really activates all of this is just living in wonder, living in questions. And I call them quantum questions, these questions that seem to have a frequency, as we spoke about with Penny. So I'm going to leave you today with this question. What if the universe is not indifferent, but infinitely tender? What if every synchronicity is a love letter? Every coincidence a gentle nudge toward your highest good? What if trusting invisible help isn't naive, but the most sophisticated way to live?
Wow.
So we will end our presentation there. Thank you, everybody, so much. And thank you, Sara, for including me and having this wonderful morning.
Wow. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Sara. Ah, beauty and wonder. Magnificent. Thank you. Thank you so much. The presentations like this really define what we're all about, and everybody that participated. Oh my gosh. Well, we have to go to the more quotidian responsibilities now.